You're listening to Manufactured with Kim van der Weert
and Jessie Lee, a podcast about sustainability and the making of fashion.
Join us every week in conversation with the people who manufacture what we wear.
Hello, Manufactured listeners. Our guest this week is Kim. Not co-host Kim, but Kim from Kandal province in Cambodia.
If you're thinking that this introduction sounds familiar, you're right. Last week, our episode was also a conversation with Kim. She's part of a growing group of university-educated young Southeast Asians passionate about sustainability and working within the fashion industry. In episode 5, last week, Kim shared her experiences working as a sea freight export operator for a major logistics company. We explored the relationship between forwarder, factory, and brand, and the impact that this can have on partnership, and therefore sustainability. It's an often overlooked piece of the sustainability puzzle. Usually, when we think about logistics, we think about the environmental impact of transporting goods all over the world. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode yet, be sure to go back and check it out. This week, we're lucky to get to chat to Kim again about her time working for a buying office as a quality production leader. The brand for which Kim worked had an unusually close relationship with the factories producing their goods, which we should note were not owned by the brand. We look at the conditions that facilitated this transparent and close relationship, like the contract terms, the sharing of certain financial risks, and even the technical nature of the products being produced.
But where we see quite a positive example of a relationship between brand and factory management on one hand, we also hear about Kim's struggle to improve the relationship between factory management and workers. We consider what strategies brand could take to be more effective in this space, and the complex relationship between purchasing terms, the pressure to reduce costs, and sustainability goals.
We learned so much from this conversation and so excited to share it with you. And finally, this is a passion project for us. If you want to support the content we're putting out, please rate us on iTunes. This helps other listeners find us, and we'd love your help with that. Or find us on Instagram at manufactured_podcast. Or drop us a line and tell us what you think directly at our website, manufacturedpodcast.com. Kim, welcome back. So this week we want to talk about your time working for a buying office as a quality production leader. And for our listeners who might not know, a buying office is the representative office of a brand in the production country. So Kim was employed directly by the brand, but working together with some factories in producing for that brand. And we talked a lot about this also in episode 2, when Jessie shared her time working as a merchandiser, which is a different position within a buying office. So I'd like you to explain a little bit about what your role was as quality production leader. What were you responsible for?
When I work at the quality team, there are 3 main tasks that I need to focus. First is about the quality management, that I need to ensure the quality of bulk production is respected to the master sample. For example, does the good was assembled the same as the master sample? Do we use the same accessory? And do we follow the size measurement? I mean, all those are correct or not? And
so you work with a couple of factories, right? So you're employed by the brand in their representative office in Cambodia, and you have a relationship with a couple of factories which are under different ownership, not owned by the brand, which you're then working with to make sure that whatever they produce is the same as the sample that they're supposed to make.
Yeah, they need to make sure that the bulk production follow the master sample, and master sample was validated by the brand.
Approved by the brand before production.
Yeah, before we start production.
So you would paint me a picture. Like, how would you spend your days? Would you spend your days going out to the factories to spend time on their production floor to see what the bulk production is looking like? Did you have a team that supported you to do it? How did it work?
I mean, at the factory, they're going to have a QA team. Or in the line, they have a line leader to daily, they need to check all the finished good that come out from the line. But as a brand, we also need to go to the factory to do the inline inspection before the final inspection to make sure that we can prevent some
critical
some
problems.
critical problem. So if we do a inline inspection, so it can be okay, we can correct the mistake or the error in the first place.
Inline inspection means the goods are still in the production line, still under processing, still doing.
Yes.
So you're basically, you could maybe describe it as the factory has its own quality control team. They're doing inspection, as Jessie said, in the line as things are being made. And then you would go to kind of check the people who are doing the checking.
Yes.
You check what their quality team, you check the performance of their quality team.
Yes, I also check the performance of the quality team. Because at the end, monthly, we're gonna focus on their performance. How many PO that
rejected or accepted.
Rejected, or accepted. So we can see whether it is worse or it improved.
If it's worse, what are you going to do?
If the quality is worse, so I need to make sure that, I need to ask by as normal to know what is the root cause. Why we have many PO were rejected.
Will this rating risks the supplier's orders for the coming season or for future? For instance, at the end of this month, you gave feedback. You said it's really worse than last month. The performance of their quality team has a worse performance compared with last month. And will this feedback eventually delivered to the buyers, and will buyers consider maybe next season or next few months place less orders to this supplier?
Yeah, this one will be considered in the as a buying office, we're gonna consolidate also the quality team together and see which factory do better than which one. So it means the quantity that we place, it also based on this one, and more importantly about the price, about the cost of the good as well. So we have two performance here. One is about QA team at the factory, and another one is the performance for ourselves, as we manage that factory.
So the information about cost and quality kind of comes together at the buying office to decide which factories you're going to reward with more orders and which ones maybe you might punish with fewer orders next season.
Yes.
So what happens, let's say you're in a factory and you're looking at the production line and you see that something is going not quite right. What happens then?
If I do an inline inspection, I go to the line when they are producing the finished good. So I call the line leader and QA, and also they have also the manager of that building. So call them and then mention what is the point that I need them to improve or they need to change to avoid that I'm gonna reject in the final inspection.
And is it always possible to fix it? And what happens if whatever you're asking actually requires a lot of time and a lot of rework and causes them to miss the shipping window or the deadline? How do you make the decision then? Is it you who decides, or you guys decide together what the best solution is given, let's say, the balance between the time fixing something might take and the importance of finishing it on time?
Most of the time when we do inline inspection, it's just the beginning when they just start producing. So it's not really the consequences that we see this PO is going to be delayed or something like that. It's just when they begin to start to produce, we can prevent that. Okay, this you need to be careful and pay attention. And if I find out at final inspection, so I will reject. So it's just a kind of warning,
reminding them the potential risks, the potential challenges.
Yes, reminding that you need to be careful on
pay
this point.
Extra attention.
Yeah.
So then let's say you do that, everybody agrees they're going to, make some small adjustment, and then you come to final inspection and then you see that actually the problem has not been solved or there's still something not quite right with the goods. Then it might cause delay, right?
Yeah. sometimes like the minor defect happen. So if there are a lot of minor defect, so I will ask them to rework. And if they cannot rework on time, so it will be their responsible to talk with logistics side to negotiate. So whether
For their side.
at the time as I work, at the time when I work for the brand, we have our own supply to manage those kind of thing.
You mean you have your own logistics supplier to manage the shipping?
Not the logistics. Yeah, we have our own logistics side because we have the office based in Cambodia, and we also have the supply team to manage all the raw material and all the shipment go out to the destination country. So I mean, like most of the time when they cannot rework on the finished good on time, so they need to go to the supply team to negotiate whether what they can do. They need to.
So there was no forwarder. In this case.
In this case, we have our internal team to solve
that's
it.
interesting. So then it basically get escalated or moved to a higher level, and they have to decide what to do.
Yeah, it just escalate to another team that responsible for the shipment. So if it is not going to to achieve the deadline, we also change shipment mode from sea shipment to air shipment. But the question who will responsible for the cost, it require many questions. It's gonna be asked why it happened. If it is because of the factory side, so they need to responsible. But sometimes it also because of the raw material that the brand purchased for the factory, it also late. And then we have many things that happen in between. So the decision is made case by case, and who
This
will
is
be
interesting.
responsible.
I want to follow up on one detail. You said, because in past episodes, what we've discussed is that the factory is the one purchasing the raw materials.
At that brand, we may need to buy our material by ourselves, except for
Really?
except for some accessory. So but when all the raw material arrives, we just put in the factory warehouse.
So the brand owns the raw materials in this case.
Yes, the brand owns raw materials, and for some accessory, yes, we nominate supplier for the factory to purchase.
That's really interesting.
So that means this brand has a very close or intimate communication with those factories. Think about it. The brand purchased the fabrics and delivered the fabrics directly to the supplier's warehouse. So it means they knew very well the usage of each piece of the product. That's how they feel so confident to just buy that much fabrics and deliver directly to the supplier's warehouse without thinking maybe the usage is different, or maybe the efficiency of the usage is different, or whatever. They just directly deliver. And I was guessing they don't do the same for the accessories, maybe because accessories is a smaller quantity and you better buy it when you are very clear about the usage. Like, for instance, how many buttons you will need for this order, or how many zippers you are going to need for how many meters of the zippers you are going to need, and so on. So maybe that's the reason. Then I was just thinking,
I think maybe they can manage the cost better because if we manage I think when it happened to the decision how many kilogram of fabric that we are going to buy. It's just we have a bomb from the factory, and we also have our internal team to cross-check on the usage. On the fabric.
On the bill of materials.
Yes.
BOM is the bill of materials. If as a brand can have the bill of materials from the factories, they can actually work out the actual cost of that product from the factory, at least the raw material cost.
Yeah, because at that time we have kind of product development team, so they can understand, okay, for the how many kilogram that this product are going to use, and they also have the BOM from each factory to compare, and also even it applied the same to the SAM, the standard alone minute, that like when you like how many minutes per piece that the factory can produce. So we also have the internal team to work on that kind of thing. So we can challenge back to the factory, and
you can challenge back to the factories to ask them to improve their efficiency.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's also part of the quality team to work on, like to make sure that the factory improve their efficiency.
Interesting.
To be honest, I'm not really quite sure what to make of this, because on the one hand, I think like, oh, this is great. You know, they're really sharing in the risk, right? One of the things that as a factory manager, I always complain about is that we assume all of the financial risk for purchasing the raw materials upfront with very little guarantee that we'll actually be able to sell them. And so I think, oh, that's quite interesting. On the other hand, if I, as a factory manager, if my customer knows exactly what my costs are, then like it can also be used against me to squeeze my margin, right? And so it's like actually I have kind of conflicting points of view in my head at the same time, because on the one hand I'm like, oh, this is good, this is interesting, and on the other hand I'm like, oh no, this is terrible. And it makes me think like, okay, if someone were to ask me what's the solution here, what is the best way to handle this, like I'd have to think about it. I don't know what the answer would be. But and another thing too, it's not just about knowing exactly what my costs are, like what you mentioned, Kim, about like how many minutes it takes and what the usage is, but also like my margins as a factory manager are often so small that, and the bulk of my cost is material cost. So if I can manage to pad my margin a little bit by adding a little bit like on the material cost, that's like, yeah, that's something I want to do, right? And now I cannot do that. So I don't know. It just opens like a lot of questions for me. Like something can be, what does that mean in terms of what we would recommend? Like what kind of solution or what kind of setup would really be the best for equal partnership? I don't know.
I have a question for you, Kim. What kind of contract that brand usually sign with those suppliers? When I say contract, I mean, is it a long-term commitment, or is it something with with a quantity guarantee?
At the time, we have like a partner factory that we think that they can produce like, okay, how many quantity that we are interested to order, and it's just like 5 years that we want to grow together.
5 years to grow together.
Yes.
So it's a sort of long-term commitment.
Yes.
In this way, I think, yes, that makes sense, because it's a benefits bonded connection.
Yes.
The brand is willing to give 5 years business to the suppliers, no matter how many suppliers. And the suppliers is willing to open space to show this is my cost today. Yes. And I need that much of margin. And that is possible on that point.
It also like, as the brand, we're also willing to support on
financially?
No.
Technically,
yes. Regarding like how to improve the efficiency,
how to improve the quality.
Yes.
That's why the brands will send inspection team to go to the factory, maybe stay two days or even 3 days there.
Like we went to the factory like 2 or 3 times per week to check, and
2 or 3 times a week per week.
Wow.
A lot.
Yeah. So
that's a lot. Yeah.
Be a close relationship, like it kind of like.
So it's really a very intimate connection, very intimate communication, and
yeah, and you're so right to bring up the contract, Jessie, because like this question I had in my head, like chicken and egg, can be good thing, can be bad thing, is totally defined by the contract, right? And so, yes, the fact that there's this long-term relationship and long-term commitment is basically how this sort of encourages a relationship between supplier and brand, between supplier and customer of trust, which is critical. And I think then can be used hopefully in a way that sort of supports both sides' objectives, right?
And it's quite interesting. Kim, you mentioned that the brands are willing to provide technical support. And also a sort of financial support because they buy the raw materials. But I think for a factory, the most interesting part is the technical support. Think about it. 5 years contract finished. The factory is actually technically upgrade.
Yeah, because sometimes we like try to improve the efficiency of the factory, and at the same time we also like have the like quality audit, so we can like give them the conclusion like how they are going to improve.
You point out the space of improvement, and you point out the solution, and you help them to actually act out that improvement.
Yes, and
we also
have the training for the quality assurance team, for the QA team, how to manage, how to control the quality, what is the quality standard and how do you need to control. We conduct that kind of training, when we have the new member of the QA team in the factory.
Yeah, it's a lot of commitment and trust. And that's why factories are willing to share all this information.
It's kind of like a close relationship, or what we call it a partnership.
Partnership. Yeah. It's a long-term partnership.
It's interesting too, because this particular brand that we've been discussing from a consumer side, I'll share from a consumer side, it's not a brand that you hear a lot from in terms of sustainability. It's not somebody who's speaking out loudly about all of the wonderful and great sustainability things that they're doing at all. And I think that is really interesting too, because if you had just asked me about this particular brand, are they doing things in a good way or not, I would have said, I don't really know. I don't really hear very much about that. And they're kind of known, I don't know, for producing just producing a lot of products. Yeah. And so I think that's also really interesting on the consumer side, because I have a lot of friends and consumers who ask me well, how can I know if the goods that I'm buying have been produced sustainably or not? And this is a perfect example that goes to show there's this example of best practice that's totally under the radar that consumers have no idea about. And meanwhile, there's greenwashing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There is no way for end consumers to know that all these technical practices are just behind the curtains. There's no way you know the contract, you know the raw material cost, or you know the technical support.
So, Jessie, I wonder if you could share a little bit about why you think that in this case that Kim is describing, the brand that she worked for wasn't using a third-party quality inspection company, because it's the situation that she describes and the relationship between the factory and the brand is pretty different to some of the relationships that we looked at earlier on in this season when we talked about your time with third-party inspection companies. So why could that be? Why would a factory, or why would a brand in this case choose to do the quality inspection themselves instead of going through a third party?
I would say there are usually 3 reasons. First, third-party inspection companies are actually quite expensive in terms of the services. I'm not saying the service is not valuable. It's very valuable, but it's also quite expensive. So a brand, as we can understand, will usually consider the cost this is part of the operations cost they are going to consider. So for cost reasons, they might not want a third-party inspection companies if they could sort out the quality issues in another way around or in other solutions. So that could be the reason, the cost. And I think the second reason could be related to their own products. For example, if the product is very technical, I like to use plain t-shirt as an example. Plain t-shirt is not technical. We can see it's just the cutting and sewing and raw materials and so on. But if the product is very, very technical, something very special, requires lots of parameters, lots of processes, lots of special requirements, then we can almost imagine that the technical department or quality department usually plays a big role in the brands. I would even say this quality department will probably get involved into purchasing. and quality checking and so on. So in this case, you could anticipate any kinds of quality issues starting from the purchasing. You could anticipate it even in the sampling. So if a quality team is well weaved in that brand complete structures, then they have a strong quality team. They anticipate quality issues on each step, starting from development process. Then they don't really need a third-party inspection company come after, because the major business a third-party inspection company could provide is checking the quality on the finished goods. They also provide inline inspection, means when goods are on the production line are still under processing. But that is even more expensive. So what I'm saying is, if a quality team or a quality department plays a role, quite a big role in a brand company, in a brand, heavily get involved into each step, then this brand actually doesn't really need a third-party inspection companies for quality assurance. So that could be the reason too, yeah. And then let me think about another reason could be the brand has a very good relationship with the factory. When I say good, I mean very trustful, or at least a long-term kind of benefit bonded relationship. So in this case, especially I want to emphasize on long term. So in this case, the factory doesn't mind to open production line, let's say, or open the internal processes for the brand quality team to get involved to check each step or to help the factories to improve quality. So in this kind of relationship, it's more like it's not like a checking and ready to be checked. It's more like a brand provides quality guidelines or quality support.
Partnership.
Yes, a partnership. Provide quality support for factories to improve the quality, to anticipate challenges, and to assure the final goods quality keeps on a certain level. So in this case, they also don't need a third-party inspection company for the finished goods, because the quality issues were already anticipated or checked or solved in many steps. So in the end, it should be more or less fun. So in this way, it's actually a kind of partnership, as you said, not really a brand and an outsourced production, this kind of relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'd thought before about contract terms, and as you emphasized, the length of the commitment and how long a brand has promised to work with a supplier. I've thought about how that might impact their relationship, and also how you go about approaching things like quality control. But I had never really considered before about how the kind of product that you're making might impact this, and the difference between a very simple product and a more complicated product. And we know in this case that the kinds of products being made were more technical products. And I'd never really given thought to how that might, first of all, drive the balance of power within a brand, like as you said, so that maybe the quality department has more weight in purchasing decisions, but also then how that would sort of transcend and affect one level down in terms of the type of relationship that brand has to have with its supplier. And I think that's really interesting because, again, like in other episodes, we've talked about how important it is to come up with solutions that make sense within a given context. And context could mean where the production is taking place. It could mean, what kind of brand it's producing for, but it could also just be as simple as what are we making?
Yeah. What are we making is very important. If it's complicated enough, eventually factories will gain quite bigger spaces for price negotiation, for technical support, and for a long-term relationship with the brands. And the brands also are willing to invest into time human resources, let's say technical support. And I think brands also are very much willing to invest to have a long-term relationship with their suppliers if the products are complicated enough. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Okay, so I want to change gears here just a little bit. Kim, what was the hardest part of doing this job for you?
At the time, I can imagine like the hardest part of my job is when the quality is not accepted. I mean, like there are a lot of like minor defects because we all wave even from the major defect, yes. And when I reject that kind of like thing, I mean, at the same time, I also heard the verbal abuse from the Chinese management to the Cambodian QA team. So it kind of like, it's not really make me happy. Like, I mean, the Chinese management team, they always put blame on their QA team. Like, why did you allow that to happen? Like,
why you didn't see it earlier? Why you didn't prevent it?
Yeah. Okay. Why didn't you detect it in the inline inspection or something like that?
Why you didn't anticipate that?
Yes. Okay. And it also is like challenging to communicate with the Chinese management, like QA management, because
like for you, so that you're the quality manager that you are working with in the factory is Chinese.
Yeah, it's
and
Chinese.
You are Cambodian. So in which language did you talk to each other?
Most of the time we use English, but
I guess their English is not very fluent.
Yes. So but like the QA manager that I work with, she can speak like Chinese is her native.
She's Chinese.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she can speak some of Cambodian words.
She can speak Khmer.
Yeah, and
Chinese.
A little bit of English. So sometimes I need, but most of difficult time, I also ask for a translator, the factory translator. They have one translator that can like translate what we need.
Between Chinese and Khmer?
Yeah, between me and the QA manager, who is Chinese.
So the QA the quality assurance manager who's communicating with a Cambodian production staff has one translator in the whole factory to be able to process this like communication between worker and factory management. Is that what you mean?
I mean, like, yes, they have one at the time. They have one or two like translator that for all department, like even from HR team or I mean,
HR team is also Chinese.
Yeah, HR team also Chinese. So I mean, like when anyone need a translator, there is a standby translator to have.
How can one translator work at
one or two translator at a time? So,
but it's really interesting because we've just talked about like this really positive relationship of trust between factory and brand. But then like we go one level down between factory management and worker and we see a totally different picture, which is, I think, just like fascinating because it just reminds you how important it is to sort of be looking when we're talking about sustainability, to be looking at every level. And just because something is going well at one level doesn't mean it's necessarily going well at another level.
So they are not sustainable at all now.
Yeah. So now we tell the consumers you shouldn't buy these products, right?
Don't buy this brand.
Don't
Sorry.
buy them. But Kim, there's so much in what you just said. I want to ask you, Jessie, to just give a little bit of context because people might be wondering, wait a minute, we're in Cambodia. I thought we were talking about Cambodian garment factories. And now we've introduced this whole new variable, which is that, yes, we're producing in Cambodia, but the factory is managed and owned the factory management and ownership is Chinese. So can you give a little bit of context about how did we end up with, how did a Chinese factory management end up in Cambodia? Like what I mean is why would a Chinese person move to Cambodia to manage a garment factory?
Because it's a bigger picture to explain why Chinese capital moved from China to Cambodia to set up a factory, you see. And then next question is, why would business owners hire Chinese? Why Chinese business owners hire Chinese to be the factory management to manage local workers? And so I think what you asked is the second question. Why would a Chinese business owner to hire a Chinese to manage the garment factory in Cambodia? It's still a little bit big question, but let me think about it, how to answer that in a clear and simpler way. Okay, I will first try to bring a context here. Textile is a highly competitive industry in China. So the size of the business, of course, is much bigger than Cambodia. So that means the size of the business could offer much more work opportunities to people who want to work in textile factories. But the competition is also very, very high. So, and the textile business in China is still mostly small and medium business who wants to move to other countries to set up a factory. It's rare you have a state-owned company or a very big group come to other countries, come to the nearby countries to just open a factory. So what I mean is, I can make it more clear. What I mean is, if there is a textile business comes to Cambodia to start from setting up a small factory or a medium factory, is usually a small and private business. And when that business owner comes, they would like to save some communication cost to not have a blended management. Because first is the language barrier. They probably need to learn Khmer, at least. And second, learn English if they don't want to learn Khmer or if they found Khmer is more difficult or whatever. So they have to learn a foreign language and they probably don't want to spend the time and energy on that. Then the easiest way is have a Chinese to manage the factory. And so for those Chinese, why would they want to find this opportunity in Cambodia or in Vietnam or in Thailand? Back to the point I said just now, in China, the competition is very high. The job or the salary are not guaranteed. And usually a small or medium textile business is starting from a village usually. So when the business owner comes to Cambodia, they want to save on the communication cost. But they still want to have a kind of trust for communication. Then they would eventually have their families or relatives or people from the same village to come to take the management positions. So in this way, the benefits on the other side is the job and the career development is kind of guaranteed. So they avoid the high competition in China and also have a guaranteed job and a guaranteed salary, which doesn't mean higher than China. Actually, I remembered what Chadu said in our previous interview that in his experiences, the salary is always higher for a Sri Lankan to work out of Sri Lanka. But in China, for Chinese, especially for garment industry, to work in an overseas garment factory is not necessarily has a higher salary than the same job in China. Not really. So the benefits are actually, first, they avoid competition. They have kind of guaranteed job. Second, they might have some shares of the business after a while because they are either the families, either the relatives or people from the same villages. So the connection between the business owner and the Chinese management are more like a naturally bonded connection, like a blood bonded, not really like employees and employment. And so you can see in this case, the Chinese management, there's no system to force them, or there's no system to support them if they want to be responsible to the Khmer workers. In fact, they just needed to be responsible to the Chinese business owner, because that's the guarantee of their jobs and their income. And if they have families in Cambodia, no matter Cambodian families or they move their Chinese families to Cambodia, no matter which way, if their families also come to Cambodia, it means they have no way back because there's nothing waiting for them in China. So in this way, I would say, now I remember that I read a few reports about young Chinese working in this kind of business, and they also felt quite uncomfortable about the management style. But there is no real system to support them. Just to think about it, as you said just now, the HR team is also Chinese. So think about it. The HR manager is the business owner's, sister-in-law, and if the accountant, the finance part, is the brother-in-law's wife of the business owner, and if the production manager, also the relatives of the business owner, then as a young Chinese or as another Chinese just come into this factory to be the management, there is no system to support this Chinese to be responsible to the workers. But everything, all the setting, just force this person to be only responsible to that Chinese business owner. Otherwise, there's no point or position for this person to work in this factory. Yeah.
Yeah, they're under a lot of pressure to succeed because, like you said, if they fail, the cost of failure is very, very high. Is that right?
Yes, the cost is very high. From Kim's description, we can say they cannot really speak Khmer, and they probably cannot speak fluent English either. If they go back to China, they will face the high competition again, and they probably will not find a similar job with the similar conditions. So, and if their families are also in Cambodia, there is no point for them to go back to China alone. So in this case, they are under a huge pressure. Or another case is it's also possible that the Chinese business owner just bring the whole families to be the factory management. So then with this blood bond, there is even less reasons for them to feel responsible to the workers. The settings doesn't help people to work in a more responsible way, let's say.
So if I were to ask you, like, if I were to ask you if you wanted to improve the relationship between workers and factory management in this kind of context, what would make sense as a strategy then? Would it be sort of developing relationship actually directly with the business owner? Or what could a brand do in this kind of situation?
I think the brand could put more chips on the tables using even longer terms of partnership as a condition to softly push the business owners to open the positions of the management to have a blended management. And step one could be, don't just hire Chinese from China, from mainland, but also hire Cambodian Chinese. You have lots of Khmer Chinese in Phnom Penh.
Yeah.
They can speak fluently Khmer. They naturally feel closer to Khmer, to Cambodian, and they can speak Chinese too. So the brand could just put it on the condition. If you want to win this 5 years contract, step one has blended management, and Khmer Chinese numbers of Khmer Chinese has to be, or the percentage has to be, 30%, 50% even, or more. So this can be step one. And maybe 3 years after, ask the Chinese owner to even have 100% local management, if that is possible, and so on and so on. So directly push on the HR policies, I would say.
Interesting. And Kim, I want to ask you on your side, because you had these experiences which made you uncomfortable, and you went back to your brand and you shared them, right?
Yes.
To your employer. And then what would happen?
When I share about the communication? I mean, on my team, I have one guy who can speak a little bit of Chinese. So somehow it might help the team to communicate it with like the QA manager. But sometimes when the time that he cannot have, that we really have more idea to put it on. So we ask for a translator.
So you mean you find a subtle way to express that it's not proper or it's really uncomfortable. The communication between their management and their workers is really not comfortable. And you pass this information to their QA management.
Actually, at the time, I also handle for the what we call CSR, corporate social responsibility. So we have we conduct an internal audit to check on this, and all thing we also mentioned in the report. So I mean, it was mentioned clearly to the factory manager or the top management in the factory to understand what is the problem. And sometimes,
so the feedback was given. The feedback was given from the brand to the factory management. The brand knew that this was happening, gave the feedback during the audit that they were not happy about it. And then what happens?
Actually, they won't say any bad word in front of us. I mean, but when we go out, we can hear the voice from the QA management team that. So I mean, it can happen when we are in front of them, but when
you mean so they can improve, but they just want to improve that much.
Yes.
They want to improve the appearance, but not maybe the substance.
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
I mean, they try to improve, by not saying those words in front of us, but they still have when we are not here.
Yeah, for me, it shows they are able to improve, but they don't, they just want to improve that much. They don't want to improve 100%. They just want to improve 10% when you are there.
Yeah.
What if the CSR report can get involved into the purchasing? What if the conclusion of the CSR report is a very important factor of the purchasing policy? What if it can affect the contract? What if, as a brand, even a brand is so much willing to have 5 years or even 10 years or 8 years contract with a supplier, but just to make it very clear at the beginning, we are going to have internal audit, and your CSR result is top 3 factors we will consider to sign the contract or continue the contract or not. You see, I think those factories, I'm very happy to hear they are able to improve. It's better than
I mean,
I know it sounds very dark as the criticism of this thing. It's okay. I take it. I'm very happy to hear they are able to improve, and not very surprised to find out they just want to improve that much. But then it just reminded me, maybe because the CSR report didn't get involved into the purchasing practice. They are not afraid of CSR report because
it has no teeth.
Yeah, it has no teeth. They are going to have this 5 years contract anyway.
I mean, on the other hand, it's just sometimes as the brand we ask many things from the factory to follow, and at the same time, I also hear the complaining of the from the factory about the price. You ask me
so many things to follow,
but the price is lower from years to years. So I mean, the important part is just CSR is one, but the more importantly is the price. Which factory has a lower price. So this one is very important.
Is it very important to whom?
To the brand.
To the brand. Which factory has a lower price? This is important to the brand.
Yeah, and then they're gonna evaluate the other factor
Okay, so CSR is important, but less important than which factory has a lower price.
Yeah, I mean,
on the brand side.
And that is the space for those factories can still,
can kind of bend the rules or ignore their CSR report.
Yes.
Yeah,
because is the space. Yes, they are still there. Yeah.
Yeah, because to be honest, the brand somehow require many things from the factory to follow to make sure that they respect the local regulation and some other things related to risk management and safety and health. Yeah, so just.
Okay, so the picture is very dark now. I think this factory falls very far from being sustainable.
But it's complicated, right? And I think it just goes to show, and maybe this is the point that we want to take away here, is it just goes to show how complicated these questions are and how sustainability is not black and white. And you can be sustainable in one way even now we're just talking about social sustainable here. We're talking really just about social responsibility. We're not even touching the whole environmental aspect, but even just within this one aspect and this one example that Kim has described, like you see some things that are really positive and then some things which are less positive, and that those things actually coexist. And that makes it really like a gray zone, right?
Yes.
And that these kind of details and these kind of nuances are so important to put on the table. And we have to really be looking, when we're talking about social responsibility, we have to look at this whole picture, at the relationship between brand and factory, both in terms of contract, but also in terms of, as Kim pointed out, price pressure, cost reduction. And then sort of those two things can be sort of pulling in opposite directions. On the one hand, you've got this contract, which, enables quite a lot of trust. On the other hand, you have this continuous pressure for cost reduction, which negatively impacts then the next level down between factory management and workers, right? And you can't really talk about social responsibility without looking at that whole picture and looking at all those levels and those loops.
Yes, of course.
Thank you for listening to Manufactured.
To learn more about our guests and the issues we've chatted about today, check out our website, manufacturedpodcast.com, or find us on Instagram at manufactured_podcast.
We'd also love to hear your stories and what you think. Collecting with listeners is the most rewarding part of what we do, so please don't be shy. Leave comments on Instagram or connect with us privately through our website.
To be the first to find out about new episodes, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd also love it if you left us a review. Leaving a review helps other people find our show, and we'd love your help with that.
Thanks for listening, and see you next week.